Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I'm joined by Tori McElhaney.
Yep.
We are here Friday after Thanksgiving. It was. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Tori, you grew up with a football coach.
I did.
Did you guys play a lot of football on Thanksgiving? Was that a family tradition of yours?
No, we watched a lot of football on Thanksgiving.
Of course, right.
Yeah, like we weren't really it was more of a, we're too stuffed to even move. My mama made the best chicken and dressing, turkey and dressing, whatever and dressing, and that would put you down. And so
like a big nap on the couch right
huge
afterwards.
nap, huge just kind of laying there watching football. Honestly, that's kind of all I wanted.
Is the dressing your favorite food for things? I'm not a big dressing person.
You're not?
Yeah.
Well,
stuffing dressing, doesn't matter what you call it.
Well, like my mama, my sister is making it for the first time this year since my mama is no longer with us. And so we will see how it turns out. I'm very...
Big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill. We will see how it goes.
Holy cow.
TBD. Because we're technically recording this before Thanksgiving.
We are. Yeah, I've been like all day thinking, are we in the past, the present, or the future
No clue.
right now? I have no idea. We're just lost in time.
Yep.
But the Falcons are back in action after their bye week. And so, just off the top, I want to quickly touch on the Chargers matchup and kind of what the Falcons' approach has been over the bye week. But then the majority of this podcast, we're going to do a special edition of the mailbox here on the pod. We felt like, given the holiday nature, the truncated week, the bye week, all of that stuff, it was probably just best to check in with the fans, see where their heads are at, provide some context on all of the stuff that's been going on. But let's touch on the bye week first. What have you learned the bye week mentality was for the coaching staff and the players?
I think it really was to get away and to do things on your own individually. I think a lot of guys went back home, spent time with their families. Same thing with coaches. I think the coaches spent the early days of their bye week going through film, doing all the self-scouting and everything like that. And Raheem Morris talked about, having conversations, not in person, because he said, I really want people to get away for a minute. And I understand that because I know I needed to get away for a minute. So I think that was a piece of it. But it was also at the exact same time understanding, and it was Kirk Cousins who said this up in Denver before the bye, this is a team that has to ask themselves the tough questions. Yep. And more importantly, they have to find answers, because the last two games that we have seen this team play is not what I feel is indicative of their potential and who they are. So how do you right the ship a little bit, and how do you get back on track? Because let's be honest, this season, as much as we probably looked at the back half of this season after the bye week as kind of like, you can mark a win for the Falcons here, and here. That's not the case any longer. The Vikings, the Commanders, heck, even the Carolina Panthers took the Chiefs to the very end, the very bitter end. If the Falcons show up and play against these teams that they face in the second half of the season after the bye week, the way that they did against Denver, the way that they did against the Saints the second time, it's going to be a very, very tough post-bye week run. And so it's making sure that you use the bye week appropriately to fix what needed to be fixed. And there are some things that we talked about, like what are realistic fixes for this team? And that's another part. It's like there are certain things that I do think are realistic fixes. There are other things that may be like pass rush, not realistic to change the whole scope of what you're doing in the span of a bye week.
Yeah, if it was that easy, they would have done it.
They would have done it already.
Right? There are no magic fixes to things sometimes. And that's what can be difficult and tricky. But I think that what Raheem said on Monday about kind of the approach and how they went about it, and it seemed like each position coach, whether that's the lead coach or maybe the assistant coaches were involved as well, took a look at their individual units, kind of came up with their own solutions. It wasn't this whole collaborative, everybody get in a room, let's talk through everything. It's you're the expert of your group, go in, figure out the fine-tuning tweaks that you want to make, and then they gave them the kind of freedom, I think, to look outside of their specific areas and weigh in on, okay, here's how maybe the running backs and the offensive line work together. And so we think that, hey, Dwayne Ledford, if you guys are starting doing this, then maybe we can accomplish some of that. So I liked how there was a little bit of freedom, but also collaboration individually, it felt like.
Well, what's interesting, too, is that I felt like it was the bye week was used for a lot of coaching work.
Yes.
Maybe not necessarily player work, because of something that I asked Raheem Morris before we even went on the bye week, the Monday after the Denver loss. I said, how, because I was asking him like how you prioritize things. You have all these things that you want to do. And he was like, well, you have buckets and you have different things that you're doing. And he gave this like super long spiel. And I was like, it feels like you're drinking water out of a fire hydrant.
You literally said that to him.
And I was like, how do you transfer that, everything, all of your learnings, everything that you want to change or do or improve upon, and talk to your players in a way that they're not overwhelmed in a bye week?
Yeah.
And he goes, you don't talk to players, which I found very intriguing because they're the ones that are executing. They're the ones that are out making the game plan come to life.
Right.
And there has been a lack of execution in the last couple of weeks. So I think it was very interesting to see Raheem's strategy of, we're going to get right as a coaching staff, and then we'll bring the players into the fold when we need to. But I also think it's this way that Raheem coaches as well, where I think he always talks about like the why and like how we win this game. Like that's always what he says, is like how the team
game matchup very oriented, right?
Not necessarily like, oh, big picture, here's what we need to do and what we need to change and all these kind of things. It's very formulaic in that it's truly, I hate saying this because it's such a freaking cliche, but like he's only looking at the next game.
Yeah. We're on to Cincinnati, right? Just the mentality. Yeah, it's interesting though, because the bye week gives you that chance to take the bigger picture look and to see things in a broader sample size. And one of those key takeaways for them was the play action passing. Maybe hasn't been where they want it to be. The Falcons are last in the league. 8% of their offensive plays have been related to play action. Raheem said, Kirk Cousins throughout his career, that's something that historically he has done well. And so that is probably something we will see the team lean on a little bit more maybe after the bye week. You wrote a great piece on this on Monday. Yeah.
Nice plug.
Of course. Go read it. Go check it out at AtlantaFalcons.com. But what did you kind of learn from that conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't take full credit because I feel like Will spent a lot of time also helping us figure out what the numbers actually were with how much the Falcons were utilizing play action and everything like that. They're at 8% over the first 11 weeks of the season, or first 11 games of the season. And that is, like you said, dead last in the league. But what's more is that there is a huge discrepancy from 8% to the Commanders at number 1 with 22%. And what's interesting is Kirk Cousins historically, since True Media has been, I guess, calculating play action percentage usage, he's been closer to that 20, 21, 22% of play action pass and using play action. And for it to be 8% team-wide in 2024, I think that's something that even Raheem Morris said on Monday coming out of the bye. He was like, that was something immediately we saw that and we knew we need to do more of. And he was like, it's not like we haven't had it in the game plan. I think that was something also to make sure that people understand. It's not like they didn't have play action in the game plan.
They've heard of play action before.
They have heard of play action. They've used it at times. Not a lot, but they've used it at times. And he was like, but what we were doing with our run game or what we were doing with our pass game, again, it goes back to like individual, I think, matchups and what they're doing in 1 week, not maybe over the span of 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah. And also, if you look at like the Broncos game and the Seattle game, right, those are ones where in the fourth quarter you've got Michael Penix in there, you've got some of your backups. So the numbers those weeks for play action are way down, kind of because of the way the game unfolded.
Exactly. So that's but it's interesting because that was something that Raheem wasn't very forthcoming with, like a lot of things that, like a lot of the learnings or a lot of the things that they want to change or improve upon or anything like that. But that was the one thing that he was very specific about. He's very specific about the Falcons needing to rely on it, needing to go to it more, needing to use it. One, because of the way this league is right now. And two, because of, again, Kirk Cousins' history in it and his success in it and using it.
Yeah. Let's really quickly touch on the Chargers, right? I think we'll truncate this a little bit for the sake of time, but when you look at the Chargers, kind of first off, has your attention with them as a team, and then what do you think the Falcons' kind of best plan of attack against them could be?
Yeah, so a lot of what I have been looking at in this matchup has to do with the defense, the Falcons' defense specifically, because Justin Herbert is a guy who has thrown, I believe, 1 interception in 11 games. One. He's not someone who's making a lot of mistakes. He has the capabilities, the arm strength, the talent, and the skill set to make this defense pay. If they are not moving him off of his spot, if he has all day and all the time in the world to throw the ball downfield, he's going to connect with his receivers. There's only so much a secondary can do if a quarterback at this level with the skill set of someone like Justin, there's only so much that they can do.
There was a play against Cincinnati, sorry to cut you off, where it was like the tight end basically was just running a seam route, and he's in triple coverage. He's like, it was almost like the Darnell Mooney touchdown against Tampa that first time where Kirk kind of throws it up and he's like surrounded by three guys but still comes down with the ball. That's where, Justin Herbert against Cincy fit it right in between the linebacker, the corner, and the safety. If you've got a quarterback that can do that, like to your point, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, especially considering the injuries that I think the Chargers are dealing with this week, and especially at the running back position. And I do. This is a game that if the Falcons aren't careful, Justin Herbert can pick them apart. And this is a team that is allowing over 70% completion rate for opposing quarterbacks, over 70%. And that's not just on the secondary. That's not just on pass rush. That's on the entire collective unit. And I can't, with someone who's as accurate and someone who isn't making a lot of mistakes and isn't making these errant throws like Justin is in this year, that is the crux of the game. It's one of those things that the Falcons don't show up and play. Honestly, the best that we've seen them play, he could tear them up.
Yeah,
and I know that's harsh, but it's the God honest truth.
No, he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. He has a combination of mobility that is kind of in the middle of like a Patrick Mahomes and a Bo Nix, right? Like he is savvy enough to step up and out of the pocket and buy time, but he keeps his eyes down the field like Patrick Mahomes does. But then when he takes off and runs, he can pick up 25 yards, 30 yards. So I think he's going to really stretch Atlanta's defense the longer plays develop, which is going to be hard to keep contain on guys like Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey and players like that. And I almost expect a quick, shorter passing game because this is a strength-on-strength matchup for Atlanta's defense, which has done a really good job of taking explosive pass plays away.
Right.
And they keep everything in front. But the Chargers like to go deep. They like to throw it long. I mean, if you look at kind of deep passes this season, Justin Herbert is right up there with the very best in the league and all of that. So it is going to be interesting to see how Atlanta kind of, keeps the roof on the back end, but then has a plan for everything underneath because with J.K. Dobbins out, they really could turn to the short passing game as a way to attack Atlanta. And then quickly flipping on the other side, Khalil Mack, I know he's out week 11, but he has been great this season. He has kind of flipped both sides, so he could go up against both Caleb Gary and Jake Matthews. Derwin James, always excellent. He has played the most snaps in the slot this season of his entire career. So I think we could see a lot of Drake London on Derwin James, which is just like a matchup made in heaven for me.
Yeah.
So that is going to be huge. I think when you look at like Tuli Tuipulotu, he leads the Chargers with 7 sacks. Khalil Mack has 4.5. And then our old friend Bud Dupree has 5 sacks of his own. So Atlanta's offensive line protecting Kirk Cousins is going to be huge as well.
Yep.
But let's go ahead and get to the mailbox. You guys asked a lot of great questions. Really appreciate those who submitted some on Twitter. Really appreciate those who submitted some through the website. If you guys want to ask Tori or I a question for any future edition of the mailbox, please go to atlantafalcons.com. We've got a form for you to fill out right there, and then we will address your question. But, Tori, the first one came from TJ on Twitter.
Hi, TJ. Thanks for...
Hello, TJ.
Also, isn't it X, the artist formerly known as Twitter?
It's still Twitter to me.
I'm never going to say anything other than I'm tweeting.
I'm just a first impression guy. You were Twitter, and that's what you will be in my contact book. He asks, during the bye, was there any thought on adjusting the defensive scheme to address the pass rush and stopping the run?
Ooh, great question, TJ. And I would have to say that, yes, you have to talk about it. You're not going to just completely throw everything out the window because there are certain things that is working for this defense, even though I know the last 2 weeks are what they were.
Yep.
However, I when I look at this defense, I think they've gotten better at stopping the run as the season has gone on.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's lost on me, despite the pass rush issues being what they are, the inconsistencies there. I think stopping the run is actually something that they pinpointed early they needed to fix.
Yep.
And I think they've done a better job. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, there's
especially outside runs. Like, they've done a good job on outside runs. The interior runs,
it's
you
a little
still
dicey.
get knifed right up the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, were there any thoughts to adjusting the defensive scheme? Yes. But again, something that I said earlier in the podcast, it's like, I don't think at this point in time, I believe the Falcons are who they are.
Yeah.
And you have to play within what your capabilities are. And there's not an overnight fix that's going to magically change any of this as a defense. There are certain things that maybe you can tweak here and there, but you are who you are by this point. You have the people that you have. And at a certain point, especially up front, you just need guys to start winning.
Yeah.
And that's something that, as I've kind of looked back over the last few games particularly, it's like no one's really winning up front.
Right.
And you're never going to be the team that you want to be if you have a one-on-one matchup and the offensive lineman's just outright winning.
Yeah, and that's where it's tough from, like, looking at it holistically, right? Because a lot of people would point to Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake and say, like, why isn't the pass rush getting it done? You guys should be held accountable, right? And I think they know that, and they would accept that, right?
Yeah.
It's on them as coaches to get the job done. But really, one thing that I've picked up from Raheem all year long is that the coaching role is a helping role, right? The players have to get it done. The coach is here to assist them, to put them in the best situation, to help them problem solve and figure out different ways to execute.
Right.
But you're right. At the end of the day, if the look is there, you got to win. And I do think sometimes the Falcons have just been a tick late, right? Like Arnold Ebiketie has been there, and then the ball comes out, and then he gets the quarterback hit, which is tough. And he has said he's left some on the table, but the chances have been there.
Yeah.
And they've made the moves. They got Matthew Judon this offseason. At the time, everybody was like, cool, pass rush, addressed. We're good to go. You'd like to see a little bit more from him. You'd like to see a little bit more from Grady down the stretch, AK, as I just mentioned, David Onyemata, all these guys. So, yeah, the Falcons know they got to get the pass rush going, but that was undoubtedly something that they took a long look at over the bye week.
Well, it's interesting, too, because I think it was even Raheem Morris said, we're recording this on Wednesday, he said today that we expect more from Matthew Judon, and Matthew Judon wants more for himself, too.
Yeah.
It's not like everybody's sitting there happy-go-lucky, oh, the pass rush, isn't that great? No one's sitting there being like that. So in another part of this, another piece of this that I keep seeing from people, whether it be on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, in the mailbag, whatever, asking about, like, oh, well, what if the Falcons do more elaborate blitz packages? What if they're blitzing more? And to be honest, they did. Early on, they were blitzing at one of the highest rates in the league, and they still weren't getting home.
Yep.
So it's this opportunity cost versus opportunity reward when you're blitzing. It's like, and sometimes that's a philosophy standpoint. If you're a secondary that's trying to keep everything in front of you, if you're having to give up something in order to get home to the quarterback and you're not getting home, that's going to leave something open. So it's a double-edged sword to a certain extent. It's like pass rush
it's like pulling the goalie almost in hockey. It's like, sure, you got another man out there to try to get a goal, but like you're leaving the back end wide open.
Right. There's you have to give up something to do that. And I don't know if the Falcons are in the position right now to be able to do that, because I know a lot of people were asking, why didn't they blitz Bo Nix more? Rookie quarterback. Bo Nix was really good when under pressure.
Yeah, and Denver's offensive line is
really good at protecting Bo Nix,
right.
and had been for the few weeks leading up to that game. Yeah. So it's all, again, going back to the point that we were making earlier, the longer that I kind of view this coaching staff, the more I view them as very, like, we're doing game-specific things and what we think is going to work within certain games. Absolutely.
All right, Kevin submitted this one on the website via the mailbag, so appreciate it, Kevin. He says, without giving anything detailed away, have the coaches been keeping an even sharper eye on second-teamers and practice squad guys who may earn more playing time down the stretch and a possible starting nod or two?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one that I answered a little bit in Tuesday's mailbag. But I think it's honestly what I said was, I don't necessarily think – I think this is a great question, and it's a question that should be asked. But I think the Falcons, where they are now in terms of getting people back from injuries and you're looking at more starters from the beginning of the year getting back involved, less than I think you're looking at second teamers and practice squad guys. Like you're getting.
I think you've seen like all the guys that they've got.
Exactly. You've seen every guy in the secondary that they have.
You've seen Damone Harris. You've seen Kevin King. You've seen all of them.
Like Natron Brooks. Like you've seen a lot of these guys. Like so, I think that to the question, it's less about, who are the coaches keeping a sharper eye on? It's like, who are the coaches waiting to get back? Yeah. Drew Dahlman is expected to be a part of the starting lineup again this Sunday. First time since week 3. Ryan Newsel, who's a second teamer, has been, I think, doing he's
been solid.
Pretty dang good job in that position in the wake of Drew Dahlman's ankle injury. You potentially can get Nate Landman, Troy Anderson, J.D. Bertrand. Hopefully, you hope that your inside linebacker group, the one that we have been talking about for majority of training camp and the preseason about being one of the most interesting groups, you have not had them full strength.
Yeah, the mix and match group has not been out there to mix and match.
No, you can't do that. So if you can get those guys healthy, what does that look like? But I do think to kind of put a name out there, I do think that Kevin King is somebody who the expectation for me was that he was going to play that entire Denver game, gets hurt in that very first series, gets a concussion. I think if he comes back within this week or next week, according to how things shake out with D. Alford, who's still working through a hamstring injury, there are some guys in the secondary who are working through some things. Yep. So Mike Hughes, so I think Clark Phillips, Kevin King, Natron Brooks, those guys in the secondary, I think you could still see a little bit more of them going into the next couple weeks if injuries linger.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then I would say for kind of the front seven, a few guys that I've noticed who have been getting some reps in there recently. I mentioned Damone Harris earlier. I think he's been kind of effective when he's been in there at times at getting some pressure on the quarterback. But then I've also noticed D'Angelo Malone getting some snaps on defense. Of course, he's like a core ace special teams player, but he started getting in the mix a little bit there as well. And then Khalid Kareem, who's a practice squad guy, has been elevated a couple of times. I've noticed him in there. So they're doing stuff. They are looking at everything they can. I do think that part of it is matchup related, to your point. So, yeah, if there were any magic answers, again,
you would have already put that forth.
Yes, they would be putting them out there.
You would have already taken that pill and been like, we're good. Yeah. I also think, just to throw out, Ruka Rororo coming back from injury potentially relatively soon, I would think. And then Brandon Dorless, I know he had his first reps last week. And that, we'll see. We'll see how that goes and continues to see if he's still active going into this weekend as well.
And that's where I do think you really miss the presence of Braylon Trice. I know he was a rookie, but we saw it in training camp. We saw it in the preseason. There were expectations for him for this season. He was going to have a role, and I think his absence all year has been kind of felt for that defense. All right, last one we've got for the mailbag.
I love this question.
Comes from William. Love your name. He asks, if there was a redraft of the 2024 draft, knowing then what we now know, do you think the Falcons would have drafted an edge rusher? And how are the top edge rushers doing?
So I'll start second. Some of the top edge rushers are doing very well. Someone like Jared Verse is playing very, very well for the Rams right now. If you go back and I answered this question in the mailbag as well. So go back and look at that answer. And I actually did break down guys like Leatu Latu, Jared Verse, even Chop Robinson, and what they've been doing with their respective teams. Yep. Now, to answer the first question of redraft, this is so hard because I understood the strategy. I understood what Terry Fontenot and that front office and coaching staff, what they wanted to do. I think when you look at it and how quarterbacks fell, all being taken in the first 12 picks of the first round, okay, it makes sense why you would feel, if you feel a certain type of conviction about a quarterback, sure. Yeah. But then I think we are seeing the repercussions of potentially not going after a edge rusher as maybe as forcefully as you would want. But the thing is I think they did try. Yeah. Right? It's been reported numerous times that this team, this front office was calling every team from 9 to 32 to get back into the first round of the draft in order to potentially take an edge rusher. Now, if they could have gotten in the middling 10 through 15 where some good edge rushers first came off the board, we feel very differently about this draft class. I guarantee. If you take Michael Penix Jr., number 8 overall, and then you take, let's just say, Jared Verse at number 15, you feel very different about this draft class for the Falcons. I think so. So for me, I almost wish the strategy now, knowing what we know now, which is a big piece of this, knowing what we know now, I wish the Falcons would have switched the priority.
But I think we knew then. Like, I think it was easy to see something like this coming because of that opportunity cost, right? And we knew at the time, hey, all right, you invested in Kirk, why not then surround him with all of the pieces to go make that run in the fall? And that is that's what takes courage about what the Falcons' decision to go draft Michael Penix instead. And I have long believed that, like, this is a decision as long as Michael Penix becomes the player that Atlanta expects him to be, and he looked really good out there against Denver for that pass to Casey Washington. I know it wasn't completed, but thing of beauty.
It was completed until Casey Washington got knocked out. Yeah,
it was a catch, and then
it was a catch.
But this is going to be a move that is probably as bad as it's going to be right after it's made. Because I think a lot of people's immediate reaction is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Why didn't you go get Liatu Latu? Why didn't you go get Jared Verse? You got a quarterback? You just signed one. Why'd you do that? But as the future progresses, in 4 years, if Michael Penix is playing the way that we just talked about Justin Herbert playing, who cares?
Also,
right?
I'll add something else too. If Matthew Judon is producing the way that you assumed him going into the season, the way you expected him to produce, coming off of 2 years before his injury where he's having double-digit sacks.
Yep.
If it's that guy that you send a third-round pick to New England for, we're not having this conversation. We're not talking about potentially drafting an edge rusher over Michael Penix at number 8 overall.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I kind of do think it's like they tried. Yeah. They tried to fix pass
It's like,
rush.
what's the intent versus what's the result?
What's the result?
Right?
Exactly.
And the intent, whether it was to trade back into the first round, they knew what they needed.
Yep.
If you're trying to make the moves to go get it, and you're getting blocked, hey, it's a competitive league.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody else has
You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And that's the thing is, like, the Matthew Judon trade right when it first happened, that was like, Terry Fontenot was hailed as like, like he fleeced the Patriots.
Yeah. Let Terry cook.
Let Terry cook, the memes and everything. So it's like the feeling that you had in that moment is obviously not what you're feeling now, but I don't think it takes away from the strategy and the thought process behind it. No. I don't think anyone expected that Matthew Judon, here we are 11, 12 weeks into the season, him to have 2.5 sacks and not pressuring the quarterback anywhere close to the clip that he had been.
Let's regress to the mean in a positive way, and he can just get like 8 sacks down the stretch. And that would be a thing of beauty, right?
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
I want him to do that. That's what I want.
I think a lot of people do. I think Matthew Judon would agree. He would want to as well.
All right, let's wrap things up. What's one thing the Falcons need to do to get a win on Sunday, Tori?
Affect Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be like sacking him, but just making him uncomfortable, doing something, anything that's going to make him make a mistake. Because again, I said it earlier, he hasn't really been making mistakes. Make him make one. Figure out a way to make him make one. Yeah,
it's a great way to start. For me, keep Younghoe Koo on the sideline. Score touchdowns.
Yeah.
When you get down in the red zone, finish with touchdowns. This is a good defense. This is good offense. They're going to be able to kind of play whatever game I think you're willing to play. So if you're playing efficiently and you're maximizing your chances with the football, that's the best way to beat a good team.
Yeah, no red zone penalties.
Yeah, no red zone penalties. And that was something Zach Robinson said today, right? On the offensive side, they're self-scouting. Can't shoot yourself in the foot, right? Yep. And that's really what it's come down to. They're moving the ball effectively.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with play call, scheme, the execution of the play call itself.
Yeah, they're a top 10 offense in a ton of metrics.
It's literally those freaking penalties in the red zone. Yep. We would think so differently, I think, of this offense and this team if in the last 4 or 5 weeks you take away all of those red zone penalties. That's the thing that's holding this offense back. The one thing. I mean, I think that this offense has shown what it's capable of. Red zone penalties are going to kill them every time. It's going to stall drives every time. Yeah.
They can clean up those penalties. We can get right back to, I think, the brand of football that we were seeing when times were good, right? Playing the Cowboys, playing the Bucks. Like, that is the style of football that Atlanta really can play, and let's hope we see a lot more of it down the stretch. But Tori, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up for
this
today.
Was fun.
I hope everybody had an amazing Thanksgiving. Again, go eat some leftovers. There's like literally nothing better in the world than Thanksgiving leftovers
True.
The next day. But the Falcons have a big home game on Sunday against the Chargers, 1 p.m. kickoff. Please check out the pregame show, which will go live on our YouTube channel an hour before kickoff. So at noon, you can check out Taylor Vismore and Derek Rackley doing a great job on that. We will be covering the game in its entirety on AtlantaFalcons.com. We will be back with our post-game recap, which you guys can hear bright and early Monday morning. But until then, for Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. Thank you guys so much for listening to Falcons Final Whistle, presented by Zaxby's. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.